Eleanor Whitmore had lived on Maple Street for 42 years, long enough to know when the house sounded wrong. This December morning, it sounded hollow. The old colonial, white-clapboard, green shutters, a porch swing that still creaked the way it had in 1989, usually woke up with her. Floorboards sighed, the heater clicked awake, and the kitchen filled with the hum of life. But now, as Eleanor stood at the sink watching frost lace the edges of the window, the silence pressed in like a heavy coat. "Big family," she murmured to herself, rinsing her mug. "Big, noisy family." And yet here she was, alone. At 72, Eleanor Whitmore was not fragile, despite what her children believed. She still drove herself to the grocery store, volunteered twice a week at the town library in Cedar Falls, Vermont, and baked a pecan pie that made grown men emotional. But Christmas had always been her season, her children, her grandchildren, her house bursting at the seams. This year, it wouldn't be, or so she thought. 3 states away, in Boston, Chicago, and San Diego, Eleanor's children were lying to her. Not maliciously, lovingly. David Whitmore, the eldest at 46, sat in his downtown Boston office pretending to review spreadsheets while secretly texting his sisters. "She bought it," he typed. Sounded disappointed, but she bought it. David was a project manager for a healthcare tech company, a job that demanded constant availability and rewarded him with chronic exhaustion. Married to Laura, a middle school counselor, he had 2 teenage boys who communicated mostly in grunts and Wi-Fi passwords. "Are we horrible people?" Laura asked from the doorway, watching him smile at his phone. "Absolutely," David said, "but for a good cause." In Chicago, Rachel Whitmore Bennett, 43, balanced her laptop on one knee while stirring pasta with the other hand. A corporate attorney with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue, Rachel had mastered chaos. Her husband Mark handled school pickups while she juggled conference calls and deadlines. Their daughter Sophie, 10, leaned over the counter and whispered, "Is Grandma really not coming?" Rachel winked. "That's what Grandma thinks." Sophie gasped. "We're sneaky." Rachel grinned. "Runs in the family." Meanwhile, in San Diego, the youngest, Emily Whitmore Lopez, 40, stood barefoot on her patio, staring at the ocean and trying not to cry. Emily was a pediatric nurse, married to Carlos, and mother to 6-year-old twins who believed Christmas magic was a scientific fact. She missed her mother fiercely, especially during the holidays. "She sounded so brave," Emily said softly into her phone. "Like she'd already made peace with being alone." David's reply came fast. "That's why we're doing this." 2 weeks earlier, Eleanor had taken the call in her living room, Christmas tree unlit behind her. David had gone first. "Mom, we don't think we can make it this year." Rachel followed. "Work's impossible, Mom. I tried everything." Then Emily, voice tight. "Flights are insane, and the twins have been sick." Eleanor listened quietly, hands folded in her lap. "Well," she said finally, forcing a lightness she did not feel. "That's life, isn't it? We'll do a video call. I'll make myself a tiny turkey." After the call ended, she sat there for a long time, staring at the ornaments, each one tied to a memory. A paper snowflake David made in 2nd grade, Rachel's ballet slipper ornament, the popsicle stick reindeer Emily insisted was modern art. She didn't cry. She made tea instead. Cedar Falls was the kind of town that remembered everything. The bakery still sold cinnamon rolls the way it had in 1969. The high school football field bore the same cracked bleachers where Eleanor had once sat with her first love, Henry Callahan, sharing a wool blanket and dreams neither of them kept. She hadn't thought much about Henry in years. Widowed 8 years earlier, Eleanor had learned to live gently with absence. She attended town events, waved at neighbors, and smiled politely when people asked if she was seeing anyone. "No," she'd say, "I'm seeing my grandchildren on FaceTime." Still, when she ran into Henry at the grocery store 3 days before Christmas, both reaching for the same can of cranberry sauce, something shifted. "Well, I'll be," Henry said, smiling that crooked smile she remembered too well. "Ellie Whitmore." She laughed despite herself. "Only you would still call me Ellie." Henry looked older, thinner hair, lines around his eyes, but the warmth was unchanged. "Christmas alone this year?" he asked casually. "So I'm told," she replied. He hesitated. "If you'd like company, I make a mean roast chicken." She almost said no. Almost. On Christmas Eve morning, Eleanor woke early and wrapped herself in her cardigan. Snow dusted Maple Street, pristine and quiet. She opened the front door to fetch the newspaper and froze. 3 cars sat in her driveway. Familiar cars. Before her mind could catch up, the door behind her burst open. "Surprise!" David stood grinning, arms wide. Rachel laughed, tears streaming. Emily sobbed openly, twins clinging to her legs. Grandchildren poured in like a joyful avalanche. Eleanor gasped, then laughed, a deep, shaking laugh that turned into tears. "You lied," she said, hugging them all. "All of you lied." David kissed her cheek. "Best lie we've ever told." And as the house filled with noise again, boots, laughter, music, Eleanor felt something she hadn't in a long time. Not just joy, possibility. By noon, Eleanor Whitmore's house had officially exceeded its safe occupancy limit. Coats draped over chairs, boots lined the hallway like a small army, and someone, Emily's twins most likely, had already managed to knock over the snow globe collection on the mantel. The old house groaned under the weight of life returning to it, and Eleanor couldn't remember a sound she loved more. "Shoes off!" Eleanor called from the kitchen, though no one listened. David was arguing with one of his sons about phone chargers. Rachel had claimed the dining table as a makeshift workspace, her laptop open, just in case, while Mark tried to assemble a toy train that came with instructions written in 5 languages and 0 clarity. Emily's twins ran laps around the living room, chanting something about Santa's snack preferences. Eleanor leaned against the counter, watching it all with a soft smile. "So," Rachel said, breezing past her, "you're not mad we lied, right?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Ask me again after dinner." Rachel laughed and kissed her cheek. "Fair." Later, as Eleanor chopped celery for stuffing, David joined her in the kitchen. "You okay, Mom?" he asked gently. She glanced at him, the familiar face, older now, lines forming at the corners of his eyes. She saw the boy he had been and the man he'd become, all at once. "I am," she said, "just recalibrating." David smiled. "We worried you'd feel lonely." Eleanor paused, knife mid-air. "I was," she admitted, "but lonely isn't the same as broken." David nodded slowly. "I forget that sometimes." She nudged him with her elbow. "You always did think I needed rescuing." "Still do," he said, grinning. That afternoon, Rachel found herself sitting on the floor, helping Sophie decorate cookies, while Emily supervised the twins. I forgot how intense your mom gets about Christmas, Emily said, watching Eleanor rearrange ornaments for the third time. Rachel smirked. This is nothing. Remember the year she reorganized the tree by emotional significance? Emily laughed. I was 8. Everything was emotionally significant. Rachel grew thoughtful. You ever think about how much she gave up for us? Emily nodded. Every day. They watched Eleanor move through the room, steady, purposeful, glowing in a way that surprised them. She seems lighter, Emily said. Rachel frowned slightly. Yeah, like she knows something we don't. That evening, as snow thickened outside, Eleanor excused herself to step onto the porch for some air. Henry Callahan stood at the gate, hands tucked into his coat pockets, looking unsure for the first time in his life. I didn't know the whole tribe was in town, he said sheepishly. Eleanor laughed. Neither did I. David, spotting them through the window, raised an eyebrow. Who's that? Rachel joined him. Is Mom smiling? Emily gasped dramatically. Oh my God, Mom has a man. Henry stepped inside a moment later, greeted by a room full of curious eyes. Well, he said, clearing his throat, this is impressive. Eleanor squeezed his hand. Henry, these are my children. David extended a hand. David. Rachel smiled warmly. Rachel. Emily tilted her head. Emily. And we have questions. Henry chuckled. I figured. After dinner, too much food, too much laughter, Eleanor and Henry found themselves sitting together on the couch, a fire crackling nearby. I didn't expect this, Eleanor admitted. Henry nodded. Life's funny that way. She studied his face. You ever think about back then? All the time, he said quietly. But I never thought I'd get a second chance. Eleanor's heart fluttered, not with the giddy rush of youth, but with something deeper, warmer. Across the room, Rachel whispered to Emily, Okay, I officially love this. Emily grinned. Mom deserves this. As the house settled into a rare moment of calm, Eleanor stood at the top of the stairs, listening to the familiar sounds of her family. Laughter, whispered conversations, the hum of contentment. She caught Henry's eye from across the room. He smiled, a promise in it. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt the future stretch before her. Not empty, but Christmas morning arrived the way it always had on Maple Street. Too early and far too loud. At precisely 6:12 a.m., Emily's twins burst into Eleanor's bedroom like a holiday SWAT team. Grandma, Santa came! Eleanor jolted awake, heart pounding, then laughed as the twins scrambled onto the bed. Down the hall, she could already hear David's boys groaning about the hour, Rachel negotiating coffee before cheer, and Mark muttering something about toys requiring batteries. Eleanor pulled on her robe and followed the noise downstairs, where the living room glowed with tree lights and wrapping paper chaos. For a moment, she simply stood there. This was what she'd missed. Mom, Rachel said, handing her a mug. Coffee. Strong. No questions. Eleanor took a grateful sip. You do know me. Presents were opened in waves, children first, adults pretending patience. Eleanor watched each grandchild tear into gifts, noting their expressions with the precision of a woman who had spent decades studying joy. David caught her eye from across the room. You okay? She nodded. Better than okay. Then, as if on cue, Henry appeared in the doorway, holding a small paper bag. I didn't want to interrupt, he said. Emily's twins gasped. It's the nice man! Henry chuckled. I'll take that title. He handed Eleanor the bag. Inside was a simple ornament, hand-carved wood, a snow-covered bench beneath a lamppost. "Cedar Falls Common," Eleanor whispered. Henry shrugged. "I remembered you loved that bench." She did. She still did. The room softened around them, conversations quieting just enough for something unspoken to settle in. Later, while Eleanor cleaned up wrapping paper that absolutely did not need cleaning yet, her children gathered in the kitchen. "So," Emily began delicately. "Henry?" Rachel smiled. "I like him." David crossed his arms. "I'm adjusting." Rachel rolled her eyes. "You're not her dad." "I know," David said. She's always been Mom. It's weird thinking of her as someone's girlfriend." Emily tilted her head. "She's always been a woman. We just forgot." David sighed. "Yeah, guess we did." That afternoon, Eleanor bundled up and stepped outside, surprised to find Henry waiting at the bottom of the porch steps. "Care for a walk?" he asked. "For old time's sake." She hesitated, then smiled. "I'd like that." They walked slowly through Cedar Falls, snow crunching beneath their boots. The town looked much the same as it always had, just quieter now. "Do you remember prom night?" Henry asked. Eleanor laughed. "You spilled punch on my dress." "You still danced with me." She smiled. "I always did forgive you too easily." They reached the common and sat on the very bench from the ornament. "I never stopped thinking about you," Henry said softly. "But life, it pulled us in different directions." Eleanor nodded. "We had good lives, full ones." He turned to her. "We still can." The words lingered between them, warm despite the cold. That evening, after dinner, Eleanor cleared her throat. "I want to say something," she began. The room quieted. "I love you all," she said, "and I'm grateful beyond words for this surprise. But I need you to know I'm okay. I've been okay. And I'm allowed to want more." David swallowed. Rachel nodded. Emily reached for her hand. "We know," Emily said softly. "And we want that for you." Eleanor smiled, eyes shining. "Good." Across the room, Henry met her gaze, something hopeful blooming between them. As the house settled into sleep once more, Eleanor stood by the window, watching snow drift under the streetlight. She felt full, not just of food and laughter, but of something she hadn't expected. A beginning. The day after Christmas always felt like borrowed time. The pressure was gone, the wrapping paper discarded, the fridge still full. It was the day people exhaled, and sometimes, if they were honest, reflected. Eleanor Whitmore had always liked this day best. It was quieter, truer. That morning she stood at the kitchen sink, hands in soapy water, watching snow fall in slow, deliberate flakes. Behind her, Henry cleared his throat. "I can come back later," he said. "I didn't realize you'd be alone." Eleanor turned, smiling. "You're not interrupting anything. My house is loud by default." He laughed softly and stepped inside, shrugging off his coat. "I was thinking," he said, hesitating. "Maybe we could have coffee. Just us." Something tightened in Eleanor's chest. Not fear exactly, but awareness. "I'd like that," she said. They sat at the small breakfast table where Eleanor had once supervised homework and science projects. Now it held 2 mugs and decades of unspoken history. Henry stared into his coffee. "I should tell you something." Eleanor braced herself. "All right." "When my wife passed," he said quietly, "I thought that was it for me. I wasn't lonely exactly, just closed, comfortable in the quiet. Eleanor nodded. I understand that more than you know. But seeing you again, Henry continued, it reminded me that comfort isn't the same as living. He looked up at her, eyes steady. I don't want to rush you or complicate your life. I just needed you to know that what I'm feeling is real. Eleanor folded her hands, heart pounding. I'm afraid, she admitted. Not of you. Of opening a door I worked very hard to close. Henry smiled gently. That makes two of us. Unbeknownst to them, Eleanor's children had noticed. She hasn't touched her crossword, Rachel whispered from the doorway. Emily squinted. That's serious. David sighed. Okay, we're doing this. Minutes later, Eleanor looked up to find all three of them hovering awkwardly in the kitchen. Rachel cleared her throat. So, Mom. David rubbed the back of his neck. We just want to say, we support you. Emily smiled brightly. Fully, enthusiastically, with baked goods. Eleanor blinked. Support me doing what, exactly? Rachel gestured vaguely. Dating, possibly. Emotionally thriving. Henry stood, amused. I can step out. No, Eleanor said quickly. Then she laughed, shaking her head. You children are unbelievable. David smiled. We learned from the best. Eleanor looked at them, grown, caring, slightly ridiculous, and felt something settle inside her. Permission. That afternoon, Eleanor and Henry found themselves back on the porch, wrapped in blankets, the world hushed with snow. I spent years thinking my story was finished, Eleanor said softly. That I'd already had my great love. Henry turned to her. Maybe this isn't a sequel. She met his gaze. What is it then? A second chapter, he said. Written by people who know who they are. Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness, but from recognition. She reached for his hand. I don't know where this leads, she said. Henry squeezed her fingers. Neither do I, but I'd like to walk there with you. As Eleanor climbed into bed that night, the house buzzing softly with life, she realized something important. Love at 20 was loud and reckless. Love at 72 was quieter, but braver. And she was ready. The morning the cars were packed felt heavier than Eleanor expected. Suitcases lined the hallway once more, coats were reclaimed from chairs, and the house slowly returned to its original shape. Quieter, calmer, but no longer hollow. The children moved with the practiced rhythm of departure, checking lists, wrangling kids, negotiating snacks for the road. Eleanor stood by the front door, cardigan buttoned, watching it all with a full heart. You sure you're okay, Mom? David asked, pulling on his gloves. She smiled. I am, truly. Rachel hugged her tightly. You taught us how to build lives. I think we forgot you deserved one too. Eleanor kissed her cheek. We all forget things now and then. Emily lingered last, eyes misty. Promise you'll call. Eleanor laughed. I always do. As the final car disappeared down Maple Street, Eleanor exhaled slowly. The silence returned, but it was different now. It no longer echoed. It rested. She turned to find Henry standing at the edge of the porch, hands in his coat pockets, snowflakes dusting his shoulders. They gone? He asked. They are, she said. Until the next surprise. Henry smiled. I brought something. He held out a small envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed slightly with age. "It's a dance ticket," Eleanor realized, "from senior year." Henry nodded. "I kept it all these years. Thought maybe we could finally use it." Her breath caught. "You mean—" "The town hall is doing a New Year's Eve dance," he said. "Live band, terrible punch, just like before." Eleanor laughed through tears. "I suppose I could manage one dance." New Year's Eve in Cedar Falls was simple and sincere. The town hall was strung with lights, neighbors greeted one another by name, and the band played old standards with loving imperfection. Eleanor stood near the edge of the floor, smoothing her dress nervously. Henry extended his hand. "May I?" She placed her hand in his, heart steady. As they moved together, slow, comfortable, unhurried, Eleanor realized something remarkable. She wasn't remembering the girl she had been. She was fully present as the woman she was. "This feels right," she said softly. Henry smiled. "It does." When the clock struck midnight, applause filled the room. Henry leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to Eleanor's cheek, not rushed, not dramatic, just honest. And it was enough. Later that night, Eleanor stood once more at her living room window, watching snow fall under the streetlight. The tree still glowed softly. The ornaments told their stories. And beside her, Henry held her hand. "I used to think home was a place," Eleanor said. "Now I think it's a moment." Henry nodded. "Or a person." She smiled at him. "Or a second chance." Outside, Cedar Falls slept peacefully. Inside, Eleanor Whitmore, mother, grandmother, woman, felt entirely, wonderfully at home.